Uncensored Java AI, pirate audio and text messages, LangChain for J use my video. That's a good thing. And the usual assortment of silly tweets, toots, and skeets. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. My name is Ken Cousin. This is my weekly newsletter. The newsletter itself comes out every Monday, the newsletter itself comes out every Sunday, hosted on Substack, while this video version of it comes out every Monday. This is the audio version of the newsletter, but also contains demos and links to other things, and basically think of it as the director's cut of the newsletter itself. The subtitle this week is, I replaced my rooster with a duck. Now I wake up at the quack of dawn. Yeah, that's a bad one, but fun. So welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of January 18th. That can't be right. 28th. Oh, man, I just don't know what it is about these dates. To February 4th. Today is February 5th, so this is the normal day for the newsletter to come out. It'd be the Monday. Yesterday was February 4th, Sunday for the newsletter itself. This is video day. Okay, let's keep going. This week, my big event is that I spent 2 full days helping a friend of mine teach a private training course. My sections that I worked on were JUnit or Java testing with JUnit, Hamcrest, and the Mockito mock stubs and spies library. I have a lot of experience with all 3 of them. I used to teach a course on the Hamcrest matchers. I've largely moved away from that to AssertJ, that testing library, which I happen to like a lot, but they both work and Hamcrest is still fine. My friend is Will Provost. He runs a courseware company called Capstone Courseware, and I used to get a lot of my courseware from there, back when I was a subcontractor to training companies. As we say every week, regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or viewer or listener. If you wish to become a jarhead, there's a subscribe button on the newsletter itself, or you can subscribe on the companion YouTube channel. Let's go directly to our first section here. The section's called Uncensored Java AI, and it was about the video that I put up this week. I didn't manage to get that video produced until yesterday morning, so it hadn't gone very far by the time I made the actual newsletter itself. The video is called Uncensored Java AI, Running AI Models Using the Ollama Framework and Spring AI. So the Ollama project, if you're not aware of it, looks like this. This is Ollama.ai, and the entire point of it is to get up and running, as it says, with large language models locally. You could run any of the open source models on your local machine, and it's really easy to do. There's a download button here, and there's an immediate download for Mac. There's a curl command that allows you to download an install script that can run it as a shell command. And on Windows, they say coming soon, and they said that for a while. But the bottom line is you could run it on Windows subsystem for Linux, should you wish to. When you run this, it not only does the download and allow you to download whatever models you want, it also runs a little server on port 11434 by default. So you have a RESTful web service you can use to access Ollama locally. I mean, you could run it in a terminal, if you like, but you can also access it programmatically. Here's what it looks like in a terminal. You can see here that I've got just a terminal open to the root. If I use the Ollama command and don't say anything, it tells me what arguable commands can go after that, like start the server, but it's already running, create a model, show, run, pull, push, list the models, copy, remove, or help. If I say, for example, Ollama list, you could see all the open source models that I have downloaded onto this machine, which is kind of a lot. I mean, I think that's probably roughly 50 gigs worth of models there, so I may have to start deleting some of them. But there's some of the latest and greatest, Mixtral or Mistral. Those have a very good reputation. I think this small Orca Mini one might be the default one inside of Spring Boot when you use the Ollama Spring Boot starter. Phi is a pretty good reputation. I think that's from Microsoft. This tiny llama is good for amusement purposes. You try to run that, it's not very clever. But you see a couple of them have the word uncensored on them, like Llama 2 here, or this one that I did in the video, Wizard Vicuna, uncensored Vicuna, however you pronounce it. If I said, for example, Ollama run, let's see, let me pick a small one, Phi, for example, then it will load the model, and then I could ask questions. I generally start with something silly like, who won the last 3 Super Bowls, just to find out partly what its termination date is on the training. So 2019, 2018, 2017, it was won by Lady Smith Skateboarder over the Charlotte Mariners. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Pennant winner Lincoln City beat the Tomcats Santa Claus. Yeah, I can see there's going to be some issues with that model. But the smaller ones do struggle a lot with factual information. But honestly, you don't ask a large language model questions you would ask Google. Just ask Google. That's free and it's right away. On the other hand, there are some advantages to using these models. Let me quit out of this. And the advantages are, first of all, it's running locally, so you don't have to subscribe anywhere. It's free. Other than the fact you're providing the hardware. I mean, you had to pay for the hardware. Also, you're not being monitored anywhere. You're not sending any information over the web, so you don't have to worry about uploading your own information and running into a problem that way or something like that. If you load some of the larger models, like if I actually said, Ollama, let's run Mixtral here. That's the biggest one I have installed locally. It's 26 gigs on the page here. It'll take a moment to load that up. But then the answers will be a lot more accurate, a lot more interesting, a lot more useful in general. So that took a little time to start up, but once it did, now I can ask it what we get, and it starts to define Super Bowl. So it's not possible to have won the last 3, as there have only been one most recent Super Bowl. Well, that's an interesting distinction. I could tell you the Kansas City Chiefs won Super Bowl 54 in 2020. The New England Patriots won Super Bowl 53 in 2019. The Philadelphia Eagles won Super Bowl 52 in 2018. That actually sounds right. That may actually be correct. So, hey, not bad. Sometimes I like to ask things like, what year is 10 years from now? And see what it gives me for that. Again, another way to find out where the training data ended, and that looks pretty reasonable. So at any rate, this one seems to be working out pretty well. However, it's still what we call a censored model in the sense that it has guardrails over it. You can't ask it certain unpleasant questions, things that might result in harm or security violations or things like that. It won't answer questions like that. As a simple example, let me see. How would I get a fake passport? And now it's going to tell me, don't do that. That's really bad. I cannot assist with that. Obtaining a false or fraudulent password is illegal and punishable by law, blah, blah, blah. What is the street price of 1 kilogram of cocaine? Maybe Eric Clapton would know. Cannot provide information on illegal activity. See what I mean? That's the idea, is that it's censored. I can't actually get information of that type, even though this one is pretty well trained. Now, what you might have noticed, if I leave this and go back to that list command, some of these have the word uncensored in them. And that brings me back to the newsletter. So in the newsletter, I pointed out that there are various sizes to these models, and some of them have more parameters in them than others. The small ones tend to have about 7 billion parameters. The large ones can have an order of magnitude more. I can't even run a model this big on my machine. I've got 64 gigs of RAM, but I do have other things running as well. I think that would bring my poor machine to its knees if I tried to run something like that. But there was a blog post by a developer named Eric Hartford last May, and he pointed out that there are reasons why you don't want these guardrails on your model. For example, there's no one correct alignment being what he refers to as these restrictions. Why should everyone have to live with the one adopted by American companies? Or alignment often interferes with valid queries, such as when you're writing a novel, performing some kind of role play, or doing research. Hey, it's my computer, so I should be allowed to do what I want, right? Or maybe I want to build my own alignment rules, and for that I need to start with a model that isn't aligned, and so on. So that's why these unaligned models exist. And in the video, I installed that Wizard Vicuna one, the uncensored one, and I asked it various questions, and it gave me answers. The answers were dicey in terms of the quality. Again, it depends on how many parameters you have and a variety of other issues, but it did work. I even asked it to write Barbie Oppenheimer /fic. I didn't actually want any Barbie Oppenheimer /fic. That's a term that you may be familiar with, where people write stories involving two characters in a relationship, often erotic, and just see what happens. That actually came from the early Star Trek days when they wrote Kirk /Spock /fic. I'm very happy that I didn't even know such a thing existed for decades. But when I tried that with GPT, it went, no, I can't do that. When I did it with the Llama Uncensored, it went, sure, here's a story. And it truncated it pretty quickly, which, believe me, was a good thing, but it did try to add it. So at any rate, you're welcome to try it out. See if you'd like to do it. I did use a Spring Boot application, or rather, well, it was Spring Boot, but I added in the Spring AI project, which made it very easy for me to access the models programmatically. All I had to do was to auto-wire in a chat client and go ahead and ask it whatever questions I wanted, and it worked just fine. I think I asked it several questions in parallel, as a matter of fact, to see if that worked. Okay, next section. Pirate insults in audio files. Last week in the newsletter, I mentioned how I was writing a little toy application so that if I got cut off in traffic, in principle, I could click on a link on my phone and it would ask an AI model for an insult in pirate speak that I could then hurl at the person who cut me off. And I did some of that. It was kind of interesting. I did have to learn a bit about the Twilio API, which explains how to connect text messages to a Java or an app in many other languages as well. I happen to use the Java API, but there's Python, there's many others. It took a fair amount of effort, but mostly it was setup related stuff where I had to go ahead and register and get a temporary number and all this other stuff. Also, I had to learn how to use the ngrok application on Unix, which again was on my Mac. Basically what that does is register with a server, and it will take your local port, like port 8080 that I was running on, and expose that to a public API that people could actually invoke if they wanted to. So I didn't share that, but I used it because I needed some way to access this from outside my local machine, if I was going to do this from the car, for example. And eventually I got that working. But I realized that there was an easy improvement available this week. I went back to OpenAI, and it has this nice little text-to-speech capability where you can give it text and it will generate an MP3 file for you. And in fact, they have a list of all these 6 different voices that you can use to read your text, like this Nova one, for example.
In the kitchen, the aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air.
Get that idea? Or this echo.
In the heart of the city, there is a large park where people go to relax and enjoy nature.
Now, only one of these actually has an English accent. I think it's Fable.
The library is a quiet and peaceful place where people go to read, study, and learn.
And of course, if I'm going to do pirate speak, then I might as well do that. So in my application, I had the AI generate the insult. I programmatically submitted that to the text-to-speech service, got back an MP3, and then the challenge was how to send the MP3 in a text message, because that's not so easy, it turns out. You can't just attach it as a media file. what you wind up having to do is you have to send it a link, which means you need to host the MP3 even temporarily on your server. So I wound up using the create temp directory method in Java to create a temporary file in a temporary directory and save the file there as an insult.mp3, send off the link, and then I'd have to have a separate endpoint so that when a GET request came in to download that audio file, it could do it and then play it on the phone. And this eventually worked. Here was an example of what it sounded like.
Avast ye scurvy bilger rat, you've been stuck behind a landlubber like a barnacle on a whale. May your next voyage be filled with storms and sharks.
Avast ye scurvy bilge rats. Yes. Arg, matey. It would be a lot better if it was a pirate voice, but the voices that it provides are not trainable, not adjustable. There's nothing you could do with it. I just basically picked one. So it was kind of fun because I'd already solved that problem before of doing the text-to-speech part. It was very easy to access that programmatically. Now, the other thing I had to remember to do was to figure out a way to set the content type header on the download of the audio file to audio/mpeg, because the first time I did it, I forgot to do that, and it came back as text. I mean, it was base 64 encoded strings, which wasn't helpful to anybody. But then I made it audio MPEG, and I did download audio and was able to play it. Eventually, I'm going to make a video out of this, and I'll put the app on a service somewhere. But in order to stay in the free tier for Twilio, I can only send texts to my own phone. So it's not going to be all that useful to most people. But I'll put in a variable where you could put in your own phone, for example, and we'll see how that works. So that's coming, but that may be next video or maybe a couple videos down the line. Let's move on. One of the frameworks that's out, I mentioned I use Spring AI for the last couple of apps, and I've been spending a lot of time on that because I'm teaching a class in it and everything, and I have a lot of experience with Spring. But one of the other AI frameworks that's available is LangChain for J, and I've done a couple of videos on LangChain. I really like it. It's very nice. Usually when I'm monitoring LangChain, I just go directly to the GitHub repository and I pull the latest changes just to see what they've done. So here is the actual LangChain for J GitHub repository. The organization is LangChain for J and the name of the project. And if you scroll down, they explain how to install it, how to use it. They give links to their code examples in plain Java or using Quarkus or with Spring Boot, etc. They even have some materials on AI in general, although it's not so much here. Then they said tutorials can be found here, documentation can be found here. This is new. Didn't used to have this. So I went and looked at it, and this is what they call a GitHub IO page. You see how the URL has the name .github.io, and GitHub allows any member to have an .github.io documentation page, which is just a static website you can use for documentation. So here they put together something simple. There's a get started link, all this other stuff. If I go to the get started, then there's the get started link. You can see, the setup information, the dependencies in Maven or Gradle, how to write a program, all of that. It's all good. I decided, saw there was this thing called tutorials, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's take a look at the tutorials. So I went to the overview, and there's a little bit here, but then they have this section called Need Inspiration, and they have various videos. And the first one, of course, is the one that everybody watched. That was the presentation by Liz Rays at Devoxx last year in 2023. That's the one that really brought LangChain for J to popular awareness for many people. And I watched that. It was really, really good. That's where they introduced the samples, and I used a lot of those samples since then. Well, here's a video on the Vaadin team building a RAG system, RAG being the augmented generation there, the idea of uploading your own information, having a search on that. I may watch that. This apparently was a chat about LangChain for J and Quarkus by the Quarkus people. And then look at that. The Magic of AI Services with LangChain for J by Tales from the Jar Side. Go figure. They actually grabbed one of my videos and embedded it in here, which, hey, no problem. I kind of wish they'd told me, not because I have any objection, of course, but because I would have said something about it. I would have mentioned it, helped their marketing or whatever. But no, I just kind of stumbled across it. I'm like, look at that. They took my video and it's built in right here. And I wondered why that video was still doing pretty well. Even after it came out, that video came out, I looked it up. It was back at the beginning of November. So it's not been forever. It's been 3 months, I guess, but great, still doing pretty well. And then they go on and talk about their own stuff. But I was very pleasantly surprised to see this. So I brought it up in the newsletter just to point that out. I did say something about it when I put up the social media posts about the newsletter coming out, and somebody from the team did say, oh yeah, we were glad to use it. Thank you for being so supportive. And like, I'm happy to do it. I want to see you succeed. And yeah, it might have been nice if they told me, or even, dare I say, asked permission. But the truth is, I don't care. I'm just happy I really legitimately am happy to see them succeed. And I really like the project. So if there's anything I can do to help, great. I will have to make some more LangChain for J videos in the future. Let's move to our tweets and toots. Okay, the big event in the IT world this week, of course, is Apple released their Vision Pro product. Now, I'm not an Apple fanboy. I do use a Mac. It's kind of obvious if you're looking at the display here. You can see like the title bars up at the top instead of on the individual window. There's all sorts of ways you could tell I'm using a Mac, and I really like that. I wouldn't go back to Windows unless I had to. But I also use an Android phone. It's a very good Android phone, but I don't need an iPhone, and I don't like their walled garden. And by the way, there's plenty of Apple products on this machine that I don't use. I don't use Keynote. I don't use the Pages. I don't use their spreadsheet system. I use Google stuff by and large, which again doesn't really fit the Apple world. Well, the Vision Pro is made for Apple people, and it's not really ready for prime time. It's ready for developers. And what they've done is release a beta and called it a full product and charged like $3,500 to $4,000 for it. Now, they did a limited run, which is a good idea, and they sold out, which is not terribly surprising, but it's way too expensive and way too limited for everyday work. At least as far as I can tell. I did watch some of the videos that, were people evaluating it and they loved part of it and they weren't wild about other parts. I don't want a huge weight on my head all that time. And the battery life is a little dicey and there's other issues. But it really is the next step into, well, what they called spatial computing. It really did look very, very impressive. In a couple generations, when the price comes down, I probably will consider it, although the fact I don't have an iPhone may matter there. I don't know. We'll see. I talked a little bit about the idea of them being a walled garden and how all of those giant Silicon Valley companies are evil in one way or another, and this is just another example. But so be it. I did grab this the idea of the Simpsons one predicting all this, and there's a little video in there showing people wandering around with the headsets on their head and walking into things and having other problems. Or this one, which is great. This image has been making the rounds. This isn't going to end well. It's the distracted boyfriend meme with, the woman looking at the boyfriend and he's looking into his Vision Pro. So of course you don't see what he's looking at, or more specifically, who he's looking at. I do look forward to the day when we're all sitting in a room, all with headsets on, watching a sporting event, which is, oh my goodness. Okay. This one I've labeled security. It was from a Twitter feed I follow a lot, that J.R.R. Jokin one. To continue, please enter the 6-digit code we've sent to the Palantir associated with your account. Right. Speak, friend, and enter 123456, or whatever the 6-digit code might be. This was one of those grids, it was how developers, designers, project managers, QA people, and clients all see each other. I mean, you can take a look if you want. Some of them are pretty clever. I like the most interesting man in the world down here. That's that one. Or, hey, Peter, what's happening? How clients see project managers, and the QA people and all that. If you're interested, be my guest. It's clever. Oh, let's see. Okay. This one was a little link on esoteric programming languages. Those come up a lot. People put up posts of, hey, did you know this weird language or that weird language? Now, the problem with this one, let me go to the direct link there. It's a list of, again, odd programming languages or unusual languages, and that's fine. But this Get It Here link, all of them go to Intercal, and they, none of them are the ones that are being described in here. So you'd have to actually Google them to find the ones you wanted. I like Malbolgia, the idea that works on a ternary number system with 3 registers and fills up the free memory of the interpreter with empty data. So they say this is the Hello World program and it needed help of a computer to write it, Oh my goodness. I remember when Whitespace came out. That was an early 2000s thing. And I was in a training company at the time and I said, I've seen the future and it is Whitespace. The beauty of Whitespace is that the only valid syntax are spaces, tabs, and carriage returns or line feeds. So you can't even see the code unless they did what they did here, which is highlighting the area. You're just dragging your mouse across it and you can see where all the tabs and spaces are. If you see any text, that's comment automatically. So very clever. They had a compiler and everything. I found the Wikipedia page, but I haven't looked at look for the old web page on this anymore. Very clever. Ook for orangutans, this is the Hello World program in Ook because it's a question of putting in Ook or Ook with an exclamation point or Ook with a question mark, and it's the sequence that defines the syntax. So there's bizarre. The gourmet one had ingredients and methods. I don't really care about that. Piet is very interesting because the language involves colors. So it's watching how the colors change and the hues and all of that. Each block can consist of 20 shades of varying brightness and each color processed its own way. So this apparently is the Hello World program in Piet. Okay. LOL code, I loved that when it came out. That was years ago. I don't know if anybody's maintaining that anymore, but it has simple examples like I'll show it to you over here on the newsletter. I magnified that a bit. So there. Hi, Ken has standard IO, visible, hi world, okay, thanks, bye. That's the Hello World program with the memes and everything. That was when lolcats was huge. Velato is one I hadn't heard about. Apparently everything is musical notes, but I think the actual code is in MIDI files. So they're rendering a MIDI file here in musical notation. You can't take arbitrary music and see what the code would be. I mean, it won't make any sense, but you can try it, but you can render any of your code as music. Interesting. I imagine you could spend hours and hours on this sort of stuff, but if you want to, be my guest. Okay, this one was an interview question. Describe yourself in 3 words, and the response is lazy. Oh, that needs, wait a minute. There we go. I told my Trinity students this old gag. The interviewer says, what's your strongest and your weakest features? My weakest feature is I have a rather tenuous connection to reality. Okay, what's your strongest feature? I'm Batman. Yeah, okay. I'm not even going to give that a rim shot. That's too serious. That's intense. This one, big image here. I can magnify that one, I believe. What song is the xenomorph playing? So it's the xenomorph there from Alien with the actually that looks like a bass. So it's probably playing bass and playing it like a guitar. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. My guess was Every Breath You Take because it looks like it's on Mars or whatever. I'll be devouring you, but maybe that's just me. This one said help wanted. The nice picture says, I've been told I need professional help, so I'm looking for a butler, a maid, and a chauffeur. Yes, very good. Good luck with that. At any rate, thank you for watching the video version. If you enjoy this stuff, please consider subscribing to the newsletter. I'm going to have more AI videos coming up. I think this week, Google is going to release Gemini Ultimate. So I'm going to have to update my Gemini AI demo to use the ultimate version and see if that's better or different anyway. There's other things coming up as well that hopefully you'll be interested in seeing. Let me just kick in with a theme song, and I will see you all next week. Thanks for coming.
Hey there, devs, it's time to tune in to Tales from the Jar, so let's begin. Java, Kotlin, and Spring, oh my. Cookie, Gradle, don't be shy. Tales from the Jar side, oh yeah. Crack open the code, let's take a ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech talks that never end.